medical culture. Like, yeah, you can be whatever you want. But I feel like there's a deeper question to my question, right? And that is, as a person who identifies as black and moves through the world in this black body, can humanism suffice as a worldview or outlook that at once gives me agency to engage it and also help me mind my own worth, my own inherent worth? Can it be, as to borrow a phrase from Anthony Penn, safe landing for African Americans and blacks across the diaspora, a sanctuary for black people, amongst others, to find healing, connection, and inspiration? So spoiler alert, my answer is yes, but it's a qualified yes. And I'll go through what that means to me, so where I've come to at this point, as define what it means to me to be black, and then also what it looks like to put that forward to some sort of aspiration. And for me, that is Pan-Africanism, and which I treat as a corresponding pillar to my humanism, and which on top I try to build my faith and engagement with the world. So as I have to be clear, when I try to answer this question of what it means to be black, this is a coalescence of coalescing of personal, relational, and communal knowledge, right? So that other people might not say it this way. So if you say it's a Christian instead, you're gonna say it's true for everybody, right? And I would say this, I know, but I do feel like there are threads of how I will try to sort of explain and define this that will resonate with other folks who experience and live black life. So I'll start. So being black is a joy. Being black is a struggle. Being black is a gift. Being black is a burden. It's everything. What being black, it means to me, also expands, shifts, and challenges. I used to think I was not black enough. I used to cherish my time in Spanish Harlem with folks who navigated blackness in the white worlds we had proximity to in ways that felt better than what I had come up with. I used to wish I got jumped into a gang of my non-project project in Ebbetsfield. I didn't want to be a gang member, but I wanted to experience a shared experience I thought was black. I used to say I wanted to go to Africa, just Africa, no country, because part of that was an understanding of blackness as universal. It was ever expanding and accepting, but it was also crude, American-like, constricting, a flattening blackness, one drop rule black. I'm learning and evolving what it means when it comes to what it means to be black. But in a sense, I struggle with this idea as it being an identity of negation. I look at it as a choice. I was born with brown skin, but I choose to be black. I choose to love black children intentionally, to offer radical acceptance to those black and queer, to create in order to reflect what I see as beautiful, inspiring. That being black life. I do not place too rigidly a value on what it means to be black. I don't think it's a closed position. But people move through the world and deal with that reality in a multitude of ways. I learned how to be black from my father with his soul records. I learned how to be black from my mother with her intermingling of faith and service. I relearned how to be black from my ancestors, writers, Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, my heroes. I'm constantly learning how to be black from my friends, my nerdy black friends, the children in North Philadelphia I work with, my Ghanaian humanist friends, all my friends. So then, Christian, what is blackness or black life? Blackness is a shape-shifting, playing with and within oppression. It is freaking it, flipping it, finessing it. It is mirage and miracle, dance and discovery, slaying and birthing. Those are the riddles I'm playing with when I foray into defining blackness. Amongst that is a deep connection to origin. Science points to the land where my ancestors were taken from, My ancestors had a way of living and knowing that is distinct from this way of living and knowing. But still human, but different. And there's difference among that different. And this does not come without cost, challenges, or contradictions. Being black in this country is not easy. You feel it in your pockets, your body, and your mind. The wealth that black households have is dwarfed by that of white households. The unemployment rate for blacks is consistently double that or more than what it is for white people. The life expectancy of black people is lower, with each respective group finding particular vulnerabilities to life that suggest relation to systemic oppression. When I talk about that, I'm referring to folks who are black and queer, who have a life expectancy of 35. National self-determination rose in the face of defeating colonialism in Africa, while the civil rights movement began seeing and tying itself to those struggles of black and brown folks worldwide. W.E.B. Du Bois, who you heard earlier, was considered the father of Pan-Africanism. But not everyone who was a Pan-Africanist saw the same way as Du Bois. Du Bois saw Pan-Africanism as a sort of the potential for it, as a different articulation of Marxism, right? Where a class struggle would also, in an economic system that felt more just, would replace the ones that sort of the European powers had created in Africa or left behind. Other folks' ideas of Pan-Africanism wasn't so quote-unquote radical, right? They felt that rather than changing the system, the goal was to have black folks in those positions. So as business folks, landowners, etc. Right? My relationship to Pan-Africanism feels more spiritual. It is something I feel the most memorable moments of being in Ghana, where folks took the mantle of welcoming a disinherited people home. The hardest times in Southwest Philadelphia as young people navigating adolescence and poverty to discover themselves with various cultural tools and innovations. In my adolescence in New York, where Nigerians and Liberians taught me about different ways of being that were exchanged. The simple sense that African descended people from across the diaspora are tied together through past, present, and future. That our highest heights are possible when we come together and share and learn from one another. We plot out a way to remember the stored memory. We aspire to create newly imagined futures. I call this spiritual, but I see it like, a little bit, in little moments, right? From my own life and art and music, but also in the national conversation and media, right? So I'll just mention it. This is a little dated because Black Panther came out like a while ago, but whatever, right? Black Panther, there's a scene of Black Panther when I saw it in the theater when the main character enters a kind of dreamscape, and he talks to his father who died. And it was a sort of collective, like, breathing in from the audience that was audible. And in that sense, that was something that had tied, I think, sort of we think about what sort of consistencies are in African spirituality or philosophies, and this idea of the ancestors and honoring them, acknowledging their presence. Right? That was a moment that was felt. A few years ago, the Libya slave trade was revealed, and the migrants were the sort of news reports about migrants being sold. There seemed to be a sort of collective, again, kind of response of repulsion. Like in France, there were protests, and some here. And then in New York, here, when our president had referred to a certain number of countries with an epithet, and to have to see Haitians marching, and singing and resisting was a beautiful image that I'll never forget. But even before then, so even 20 years ago, there was a song by Talib Kweli, who's a rapper. It was in this group called Black Star, which is a reference to Marcus Garvey. Going back, see, it's all tied together, right? And he had a song called 2000 Seasons. And for some reason, the words stuck to me. But who do we aspire to reflect our own people's death? For whose entertainment shall we sing of agony? And what hopes that the destroyers aspiring to extinguish us will suddenly suffer remorse at the sight of their own fantastic success? The last imbecile to dream that dream is dead. He was killed by the saviors of his own dream. So the title of that song, 2000 Seasons, like I had no idea where that was from, right? That quote was quoting someone else, and so I never knew what it was related to. But I felt in that quote there was a suspicion, right, of the skepticism of my place in this country, perhaps in this world, where many of the institutions were tainted with a disease that they refused to acknowledge. Anthony Pinn, a famous sort of humanist author, spends a lot of time in his book, When Colorblindness Isn't the Answer, underlining the imperfect relationship that humanism has to race. Many of its heroes or people retroactively attributed the label of humanist or skeptic, like Thomas Jefferson, were leading intellectuals as well as protectors of slavery. Even Felix Adler had backward ideas on race, as well as his hero, Immanuel Kant. I've been trying to, so in my journey to sort of reconcile what it might mean to be humanist and also someone who is invested in Pan-Africanism, I've been trying to draw out these little sort of tenets of what I believe that Africana humanism would look like. And I'll share one of them I wrote. I share these on Facebook, so go to my Facebook friends and see these as they develop. It's just funny. In Africana humanism, respects and acknowledges traditional, religious, artistic, and intellectual paths employed by ancestors and seeds of the diaspora as innovations that can be used to enhance and expand Black life. The uniqueness and expression of human searching supplies data that is important for understanding Black past, present, and future. Black life is the art of reconciliation. And to that point, the mode inhibits, but to the point that that mode inhibits the inherent worth of the Black body. So we'll only go accepting until it evaluates that. And Africana humanism, for instance, respects the different manifestations of a griot, right? Whatever that may look like, whether it's a preacher, a rapper, or a spiritualist. They offer different insights and may be treasured again until they violate the inherent worth of the Black body. Ritual acknowledgement of the coming of age of children must be expressed, but does not necessitate the physical violation of the Black body, which I'm referring to, female genital mutilation right there. And Africana humanism unifies the aim while protecting the diversity and grows to minimize the harm. So what I was sort of trying to express with that is that my idea of African humanism, Africana humanism, does not have, I think, the same limits and restrictions that maybe this a European articulation of humanism has, where that divide between reason and everything else is very articulate. So, one of the things I think is important to own as a person who identifies as a humanist, that essential community acts as a barometer of the relationship, and then but must be nurtured and kept alive. If that spirit dies, then the relationship dies. So Mufusome also goes on to talk about how the community is central to that relationship, to that couple nurturing that spirit that they create together. It's not something that's hidden in privacy or explored at its greatest depths between two people, but enlivened and supported by the community around them. She has this metaphor where she says, we believe that a relationship, instead of starting at the top of a mountain, like it's the most intense, the honeymoon stage, right? That's the apex. But rather, a relationship starts at the bottom of the mountain, and the community draws it up toward the top. This informs my ethical culture because it gives you a way to understand this quote by Felix Adler. The more my life is implicated in the lives around me, the more I stand on the edge of life, my thoughts will be occupied, not with the obliteration of my empirical self, but with the future of those that survive, that best future of theirs, which I long to assure. And they, in turn, if they are fine natures, will pass through this inward experience with me. Thus I descend into the darkness and the depths, and that they descend with me, and I am to rise of the darkness and depths, and I am to gain the force to do this in order that I may lift them with me. Right? So in that, Felix Adler talks a lot about the way that suffering can in darkness, what one can draw out of that, how that can expand a person. And that's possible because of relationship. Right? So, poem break. Okay? Right. Next week, we're going to have a poem here, maybe it's a little introduction. I wrote this before I went to Ghana as a what do you see? Maybe you could get something out of it. Exile/Liberia. I fell asleep and traveled to a place that could love my face. I brought the blood of centuries spilled and passed on to a home I had never known. Set aside for the day I was freed, I prepared the master to lead. I made myself king, invaded the wombs of the nation to bring forth a new breed. I swayed the people to change, to leave behind the ways of old. I treated my own as pieces of gold, shining in the deep dark of the skin. I bartered and profited off my own kin. I had arrived in a place named for freedom, the nation of my destiny, to recreate, to manifest in the way I thought, the way I dressed. This burden was my gift, my boulder to lift. But in the depths of a dream, within a dream, a true revolutionary had come in the middle of the night to slit my throat, and I awoke. I wrote this as a warning to myself, a warning that I still think I have to give attention to take heed. It's a reminder that the intoxication of power is something close to me and something real, something I've been taught to pursue, something I've been taught to maintain. A reminder that my very existence has relied on the backs of people far away, near and still. From my cell phone to the oil consumed, the climate impact of my daily life, blood is paid on the other side. So, we had a little bit of the explanation also for the poem. It was called Liberia because Liberia was established as a place to recolonize freed slaves. Right? Because everyone, so including Abraham Lincoln, was sure that blacks and whites could never live together in a free society. So Liberia was established. And some freed slaves did go back to Liberia. And what's interesting, and it's something I look to continue to do research on, is that the black folks who went to Liberia didn't treat the folks in Liberia very well. Replaying some of the damage and traumas that they experienced. So, 2000 Seasons is the title of a book by Armand, who also wrote a wonderful book called The Beautiful Ones Are Not Born Yet. And 2000 Seasons reads like a folk tale of a tribe that has come into contact with slave traders, both Arab and European. It goes through the weaving of the values that change within the tribe as it's met by outside forces. Again, most namely its relationship to power. That power, the idea of power, has become a core concern as I move through humanism and Pan-Africanism. And I see this, again, being challenged in the diaspora. Right? When we talk about Rwanda, we understand what happened in Rwanda. Right? There was something called the Hameg hypothesis, right? Where the Tutsis, because they were thought to look more like Europeans, were given more power in government positions, land owning, right? And then the Tutsis has wanted to sort of have a free Rwanda from the colonial powers. The colonial power then decided to put power in the hands of the Hutus, right? And that dynamic, right, set into motion, right, what would it culminate in the Rwandan genocide? And I say culminate, but not as an ending, because it's still a continuing, again, conversation on how do we navigate the power disseminated between intra, right, tribes and countries, right? Ghana has the same issue with the slave trading. There was a slave trading tribe. They had a relationship with the Fanti, right? Were the ones that, and in the country now, the Fanti are still one of the most powerful and economically sound ethnic groups, while the part of Ghana I was in the north, right, is underdeveloped, poor, right, has less power, less resources, right? And so navigating those conversations, even within the diaspora, is important. Perhaps it's so I want to say that I want to read a quote from 2000 Seasons. What else could it have been but blindness? The inability to see that there is more than the choice between becoming predators and staying prey. More than the choice between hunters and the merely hunted. Between destroyers and the destroyed. Why did they not think to beat new paths to the old way? Why could they not see that those whose vocation it is to destroy destroyers do not through their work become destroyers, but the necessary and dispensable finders of paths to the way again? Connected thought, connected action. That is the beginning of our journey back to ourself, to living again the connected life, traveling again along our way, the way. I find this a struggle to center that disconnectedness that Amar tells in 2000 Seasons. There's so many incentives in our system that encourage us not to connect. We have the lowest parts of our natures as individuals and institutions that metasize that self-interest. And we have to learn how to navigate that. And I think that's the challenge that draws me to humanism. And I think in terms of how do you manage the individual and the collective, right? And I think Pan-Africanism expands that conversation, because then it becomes how do you manage power that also influences that relationship. We shall learn to see, this is Felix Adler in The Religion of Beliefs, we shall learn to see and know the human beings with whom we come into contact from a new point of view, regarding them as masks behind which divinity lurks, as revealers of hidden spiritual possibilities. We shall attribute a certain greatness and sacredness to them, and the cheapness that now marks our estimate of those whom we are familiar with, vulgarizing human intercourse, will disappear. In this, Felix Adler is talking about people we may be familiar with, may see, but I wonder what it looks like expanded to the other, the far other, or what it looks like expanded to those who might be too different for us to really understand. And if we're engendered, if we intentionally or sort of purposefully engender sort of intentional inclusion of Black thought, other kinds of thought, but maybe Black thought, right? And Black experience center and lens, what might that lead us to? For me, that work has deepened my humanism, seeing divinity in the utterances, ideas, and experiences of Black people. Du Bois makes the case that the most important event in modern history was the trading of humans from 1441 to 1870. And I have to agree, because as much as we advance technologically, our ethics as a society is still influenced by some basic justifications that made slavery and white supremacy possible. We are dealing with a spoiled modernity. All of the things that we have accomplished were possible because of stolen labor and oppression. There's nothing that this doesn't touch, from medicine to artificial intelligence to urban planning. Our inability to locate and dispel those original justifications, the acceptance of oppression as a price for advancement, has left us here. Looking at a future with the world warming and people moving to lands that they feel, moving to lands with folks that feel like they owe nothing for the present condition and why they're moving, right? Where will we end up? I believe if we make the effort to fill in those gaps provided by time, space, and history, those voids filled into, we'll fill in those voids, right, that have been sort of now been filled with the unearned absolution for responsibility and accountability for the world we inherit. It will be easier and more conceivable to extend empathy and understanding and support to our neighbors who are new or to those who may not be as visible. As the earth changes and turns and creates new problems for us to solve, we may be more ethical than our forefathers and mothers in how we meet those challenges and how those challenges define us.
Thank you so much, Christian. We have just a couple minutes if anyone has a response or a question they'd like to share.